Recording. Okay. All right. So the recording has started. I'll introduce the show. So welcome everyone to my podcast. My name's Sammy. I am wanting to do a podcast, a show, a channel, whatever you want to call it, that has conversations about lots of different things, but just generally a conversation about thinking about life and what is good and how to live a good life, how to think about life, and how to really question and reflect internally and externally so we can all live better lives. And the best way that I want to do that is just to speak to people that I find interesting. And I've got my first guest of the show, someone who I find very, very interesting. I'll give him a short introduction, but he can introduce himself. But this is Dayan Kada. He was the rabbi of my synagogue, but now is one of the leading rabbis in the Spanish and Portuguese community. I won't give any more introduction. You can introduce yourself. You can tell me about your qualifications, rabbi, if you wish, just a little bit about yourself, and we can go from there.
Thank you, Sammy. It's a pleasure and honor to be the first on your channel, and I hope it's successful and takes off. You've always been a very insightful and questioning and intelligent young man, and this is what you need to do. And I wish you much success and that it works out. So my name is Dayan Kada. I am currently a rabbi in Maida Vale at the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue. And I have a family of 4 children and my wife, Tamar. And I also work in the Bet Din, the Sephardi Bet Din. The Bet Din is the religious court where we deal with family issues, with mediation between Jewish business partners, conversions, Jewish identity, these kinds of things. So with my communal and also judicial work, my life is interesting, to say the least, and very privileged, I feel, to be able to help other people and lead a role in a community.
That's fantastic. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, Dayan Kada, is I think I met you when you were possibly 26. Is that correct?
25, probably. It was about 10
25.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Time flies. But I remember speaking. We've had many conversations, and what I find so interesting about you is that you are a person who is so passionate about learning and growing one's mindset and intellectual base, more so than probably more rabbis that I've met. If you don't mind me saying that, I'm aware that you have a law degree and you are trying to elevate your rabbinic credentials. You're a Dayan and someone who's always constantly learning, but someone who's not ignorant to the modern world. I guess you're a relatively younger rabbi, but still very learned. And we used to have conversations, but there was always a sense that you're very aware of modern trends and accepted it, but you did your best and do your best to balance it in how you see the world. But you're very aware of science and certain happenings, but you keep it in your Jewish perspective.
I think that's a crucial point, and thank you for that, Sammy, because you've articulated really my life philosophy. We as Jews, and especially as a rabbi, believe strongly that our religion is not one in which we hide away in the corner. We lock ourselves up in a monastery and we pray to God. That's not what our religion believes or teaches. What we believe is that life is there to understand, to enjoy, to work on, and essentially one of the key phrases in our rabbinic literature and even in our liturgy is letaken olam, is to rectify the world, to make this world a better place. And you cannot be involved in making the world a better place if you don't understand where the world is holding and you don't understand basic things of science, of the young generation. This is why I believe that it's so important for rabbis to be well versed in different aspects of life and to have interests and hobbies outside of religion. I think it was William Temple who once said that there are a lot more things God is interested in than just religion, right?
I like that. I like that a lot.
And you're saying that tongue in cheek, but the idea being is that our religion is one in which we incorporate the world into our life, not that we see the world as a kind of distraction, rather the world is something which we need to engage with and be involved in. And that's something which I do my best to try to understand. And we've had discussions over the years where we have profoundly disagreed with one another. You may have different beliefs to mine, but that's all part of life, that we share different views and we are willing to hear one another and to respect each other's views. Unfortunately, we are talking now when we actually discussed having this conversation. This was before the events of this past week. We're now on the 13th of October, 2023. Wow. We are a few days away just from the most terrible atrocities committed to my people, to the Israelis. And I have unfortunately spent some time online just seeing the reactions of different people, and it just distresses you to the core. There are people who just cannot at the same time condone what Hamas have done, offer complete solidarity and support for Israel, her people, her hostages, and at the same time care for innocent Palestinians, for civilians, unfortunately, being caught up in a war. The reality is a war is not a pretty place to be in. But those two are not mutually exclusive. But unfortunately, 90% of people on social media seem to think they are mutually exclusive. Like if you support Israel, then you are against Palestinian, then you want Palestinians to be murdered. And if you support Palestine, that's it's unfortunate. That's what life is now about. There is a polarization of views, and dialogue is key to a better world.
Yes. This is somewhere where we're going, but I think it's interesting. So one of the questions that I pointed to you that I may ask you is the way the world is going, the way it's moving, is it conducive to a good life? And just the point that you made, dialogue, it's really, really important. In my own experience in the past week, I have friends on both sides of the conflict. I've reached out to some friends who are Palestinian or have ties to Gaza, and I don't speak to them publicly on social media. I speak to them privately on social media, where there's a space between us where no one else is judging us. We're just within each other and we can speak to each other and judge each other. And I've rebuked some of them on some of their tonality and their phrasing of the conflict. And credit to them, like they have their views, but they understood completely what I was saying. And we had an understanding of let's treat both sides with humanity. So I think on social media, it's not real. That's not real life. What is real life is actual proper communication. All this performative public stuff is fake. If you actually have a conversation with someone properly over the phone or like this, it can be conducive to something much better. So I don't think people's aggressive public posts truly show who they are. It's just their emotions that are what.
That is true. That is true. The thing is, I don't see sides here.
Yes. Yeah.
I see a people which have been butchered, and I see another people which are unfortunately living in dire conditions, which some people will blame Israel for, and I personally, whilst Israel has some responsibility for it, I believe the main responsibility is for their government, who have neglected them since 2005 when they were 2006 when they were elected. And so there aren't two sides. How can there be two sides when it comes to Jews, human beings, babies, pensioners, women being butchered, raped, beheaded? Yeah, I find that very difficult.
Yeah. Well, for me, in terms of two sides, like there's butchery on both sides. The extent and the tonality of the butchery might be different. One side possibly, well, both sides feel entitled to some of the things that they're doing due to historical things, you could argue. But to me, I'm the same. It's just both sides. There's butchery and there's just human beings on the other side, and it's really, really sad. Um, anyway, let's move on because this the current political climate naturally influences dialogue, but I want the dialogue and the conversation to be more holistic. So, just going back to yourself, um, why do you do what you do? Why are you a rabbi, and how did you come about it, and what influenced you?
That's an interesting question. I do not come from a rabbinic family at all. In fact, my father was a doctor, my mother was a pharmacist. Come from quite a scientific family. My siblings are all professionals in different areas, psychiatry and finance. And I went to a middle of the road high school, and I went to yeshiva. Yeshiva is a Jewish academy, a kind of Jewish university where you study Talmud and Torah texts. I went there for a year, and plan was to go for a year, then come back for university. I went there for a second year, I went there for a third year, and then I decided that this is something which I love, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing it. And so I then went on to pursue a rabbinic diploma, and since then I feel extremely blessed to be able to have the ability to study and teach wisdom of Torah, and also to be able to offer spiritual, emotional support for my congregants, for my friends, and I feel it's an incredible privilege to have a career in a field which you are helping people.
Mm.
I find it difficult to, for me personally, I would find it difficult to be able to enjoy life just sitting in front of a computer, studying numbers or finance or other kinds of things. I feel deeply that life is short and you have to do something in it which will be impactful and memorable. And so if you can touch someone else's life, whether it's at a funeral, at a wedding, at a bar mitzvah, at any kind of life cycle event, if you can give people courage, if you can give them wisdom, if you can teach, that is really something which I'm very fortunate to be able to do. And that's my life mission, really, to educate. I'm a strong believer in education. I'm a strong believer in people having the ability, giving people the ability to be able to study off their own accord. Just like literacy wasn't a given, right? Till recent years, relatively, and most people had to rely on others to be able to read. And now, thankfully, most human beings grow up in an environment where they have the ability to read and deduce things for themselves, make their own judgments. Unfortunately, in the Jewish community, there are many people who have to rely on the rabbi to be able to explain to them their heritage. And I see it as my mission in giving people the tools to be able to unravel things themselves, to be able to take a text and understand it and make their own assessments and judgments off that text rather than having to rely on others to teach it for them.
Mm.
And I hope for a day in which, just like there is widespread literacy, excuse me, in each person's vernacular, there will be in Torah and in Hebrew as well.
Did you have a light bulb or epiphany moment that was like, this is exactly what I want to do, or was it a gradual process?
No, it wasn't. There was no light bulb moment. And I don't, I think these things have to be a process. It was a maturity of really, I've always questioned what life is about. I can remember as a 12, 13-year-old already then having existential questions. Like what is life about? What is God? Where is God? How much is God involved in this world? And I still recall I had some of my teachers in school who would criticize me for asking questions, saying that it was an excuse to drop out. And I had teachers who encouraged it, and thankfully I had those because I pursued and pursued, and I've never stopped questioning, and I still continue to do so. And that's all part of life, is trying to understand and to analyze and to delve further and further. So it's certainly a process, one which has been a long one and hasn't stopped. Life is a journey; it's a continuous journey.
Yeah, I hear that in many contexts. So it's interesting phrasing. So what is life all about for the average human being? Whether it doesn't have to be Jewish, just what is a good life and what's it all about?
Well,
That's a big
it's
question, actually.
it's a
But
big it's a
what
big question. If I
what
could
is a
give you
good life? What is a good life?
right, yeah, if people had the answer to that, then I think the world would be a far happier place. Um, Nietzsche once said, anyone who has a why can get through any how. Something along those lines, he said. And I think there are a few components to a good life. I think firstly and fundamentally is that humans have a why. Viktor Frankl in his it's recommended reading if you haven't read it, Man's Search for Meaning.
I haven't. I haven't read it yet.
You need to read it because he said, the Nazis could strip you of everything. They could take everything away from you. The one thing they couldn't take away from you was your will to live. And you can only have a will to live if you have a why to live for. And I feel so much of the new young generations are groping through life, not understanding why they are going through life, what the purpose in life is. Look, I'm a rabbi, I'm a Jew, I believe in God, and I believe that's for me my why. My why is to bring godliness into this world. And every person can have their own why. I feel though every human being needs a why, and this is why there has been such an uprise of what you called earlier on performative acts, or people ascribing to a certain kind of ideology. And I'm not going into now trans and all of this kind of stuff, but the idea that LGBT needs a flag, that you need to kneel or do all of these kinds of different actions. For me, this is just replacing. Human beings have an intrinsic need to be part of something, to want something, to have a mission in life. And Western society, whilst it's given us great things and has really taken human civilization further, has not given us a why. And when there's a vacuum of that, then you have to create new movements to be able to have an affinity to be able to have a kind of purpose. I fly this flag, so I have, I'm supporting these people's rights, so I have a mission, right? And this is why there are all these different kinds of groups coming out. Excuse me, I've had a bit of a cough recently. With the different flags and their different, movements and all these kinds of things. There's almost a tribalism in these things, which, coming back to what I said earlier on, there aren't sides in these things. It's not about sides. We should all believe in these things equally, but to be putting up flags and that for me is something which
Take your time. Are you okay?
that for me is something which needs to be really ingrained, that people need to have a mission. And part of that is, and this is the second point I wanted to come to, is I believe a really good life is one where a person gives, where a person is always on the giving end rather than the receiving end. Giving creates such a sense of happiness and such a sense of feeling worthwhile with oneself. More ironically, more than it does when we take.
Couldn't agree more. I agree.
If you think, you don't have kids yet, Sammy, but you think about children. We do so much for our kids, and what they do for us when they're young, at least, is almost nothing. And what we put up with them, to have babies wake us up at night, they're constantly taking money from us, they're constantly needing us to chauffeur them around, or we do so much for them, and yet they are our greatest source of happiness. Because the more you give, the more you invest in, and the more you love. And there's a famous rabbinic idea that the Hebrew word for love is ahava, and the root of the word love is actually to give. And that's this idea, really, in a nutshell, that when you give, you love. And for me, a good life is one where a person has a goal, a mission, and also a person is in a position to help others in their life.
So if you were to someone who doesn't quite have a why, what advice would you give to them? For me personally, if I was to give someone advice on how to find a why, I'd say just look around and be curious and ask questions. But I don't know if that's the best advice. Do you have something more direct for them, or?
Look, I think when you're young, you need to explore and you need to try to find out what is it that makes you passionate? What is it that really makes you really passionate about something? And once you found that thing, and it can take some years to find it, then you have to pursue it. We are, at the end of the day, humans, and we, as I said earlier, we need some kind of why. I believe belief in a community, in a religion, gives a person a grounding. I think a community, and I'm not talking about Judaism specifically, whether it's Christianity, Islam, whichever religion it may be.
Does it have to be a religion though? Because there are many communities around different things.
But that's fine. It doesn't have to be religion. But what's that community for? Again, what's it? What is it that?
It could be sport. It could be music. It could be.
Yes, I hear that. The thing is, we as humans have something within us, I believe, which wants something beyond. Why is it that we as humans, get so touched when we hear beautiful music, or we see some kind of amazing landscape? Right? There's that sense of awe, right, which fills us. And I believe there has to be something beyond just the material world, which fills us with a kind of purpose, whether that's God, or whether it's helping others, something like that, where it's beyond just being part of something where it's just physical, pleasure, something along those lines. I think that's something quite key.
Well, just to push back on what you just said, or ask you to clarify, because you said why is it that human beings, if we see a piece of landscape or listen to a piece of music, well, those things are physical, or they are
Oh,
of
sorry,
material.
are or no?
They are physical, but they send us to a different place. The physical sends us into the spiritual. So what I would say is, it doesn't matter what it is, uh, but it could be like looking at a tree. It could be having a conversation like this, but it could send us into a mental state where we feel spiritual.
100%. If you find something like that, 100%. I totally agree with that. I think that's 100% right. There has to be something there which is beyond just something which offers you emotional and spiritual purpose. And yeah, you're right. I agree with that. If you can find that, then that's definitely something to pursue.
Something slight in my own personal life. I don't know what it is, but I can feel that it could be anything, but something can trigger a sense of that in me, and then I just connect. Just something happens. It could be in a church, it could be in a synagogue, it could be in it could be talking to somebody, and I could just go into that zone.
That's beautiful. That is really beautiful. We humans seek something which transcends us because we know that we are mortal. We know that there's our physical life comes to an end, so there's only so much that can offer us. But when we have those, I don't mean outer body in the literal sense, but something where we feel it transcends us, that gives us great, I believe, in my experience at least, gives us great joy and happiness and sense of accomplishment and fulfillment.
So these are really interesting topics. We're talking about dialogue and spirituality and meaning, and essentially a good life is something that has all of those elements. We haven't really spoken about success, I mean, or making money or whatever. We haven't touched upon those things. Is there an element in which those aspects should or could be involved? How do you find success or money?
Interesting. That's interesting. Let's start with money. I think money's clear. I certainly do believe that if you don't have money, you're not able to have the things which you need to live a life which is a decent life. Then that is obviously something which prevents you being able to lead a happy life. Once you have reached that point where you are able to get through life and buy the things, basic, shelter, food, drink, basic entertainment, things which you need. And this is backed up, by the way, by scientific studies. An increase in money does not bring much happiness. Proportionate to that difference from going from the brackets where I can't cope and I struggle to pay my bills and I can't have the basic things which we need, whether it's food, medicine, shelter, that prevents happiness. But once you've passed that bracket and you are able to have these things, then increase. So I go to a more luxurious holiday. Instead of going to Europe, I'm now able to go to beyond and have a longer holiday. Instead of having just for 1 week, I can go for 2 weeks. These things definitely bring more enjoyment. Do they bring more long-term happiness? From what I've read and my understanding is that they don't. And if it does, it's not proportionate to the more amount of money they need to make, right? And
but what you're saying is, what this might be a bit reductive, but you could argue what you're saying is, beyond the necessary amount of money does not contribute to a or the good life.
I believe so. One thing I'll just clarify. Contribute, perhaps it does contribute, but minimally.
Mm.
It will not be sufficient for that to be the basis of a good life. Most definitely not.
Mm.
Because as
Yeah.
I said, we need more than just we're mortal.
Mm.
We need more than just something physical. In terms of success, yes, I think we all want to be successful in life, but successful in what? If one is successful in bringing godliness, if one is successful in helping, if one is successful in making other people smile and making the world a better place, then that the more successful you are, then of course the happier you'll be. If I am able to impact, as a rabbi, if I'm able to give a lecture to 100 people as opposed to 10 people, I'll feel far happier at the end of the evening having spoken to 100 people rather than 10 people, because that means I have now had more of an impact, and I believe I am teaching things which are conducive to living a better life. And so I will feel, because I've been more successful, I will feel happier.
Mm.
Um, and so, yes, success in what? If success, it's all relative to what the success we're talking about.
I guess it's incumbent on the person to define their own success.
Exactly.
Just the Zoom timer is slightly timing out, so there may be a pause at some point, but I'll give you a 1 minute warning. I could pause it and then we can uh, go again. In terms of just a question, you said I'd rather give a lecture to 100 people compared to 10 people. I think you were just using it as an example, but I'll raise another question. Would you prefer to give a lecture to 100 people, but not necessarily or minimally impact those 100 people, or give a lecture to 10 people, but you might not connect with each and every one of them, but you know 100% that two or three you have seriously impacted them and shifted their mindset in a manner that you feel is positive?
Most certainly the latter. Um, I'm a strong believer in quality over quantity. Do less things in life properly rather than lots of things in life not comprehensively.
Mm.
And uh, I would, I'll be happier to sit down with one person and profoundly impact his or her life, rather than 100 people who have very minimal impact.
Mm.
And again, it comes back to what you just said a few minutes ago. It depends how you define success. I define success by how much impact I can have.
Mm.
And being able to impact one person tremendously and reshape their life and give them courage and hope and solace and whatever it may be, over 100 people where you've got very minimal, for me, it's a no-brainer. It's the latter.
Mm. Yeah,
Which is why,
I like that. I like
which is why when I often have conflicts in my schedule, and I have to weigh up what am I going to say yes to, what am I going to say no to, and I will often make these judgments, and I
Mm.
may go to something where there's less people involved, but I feel it's something which is more beneficial and therefore more rewarding for me.
Mm. Well, I appreciate you including me in your busy schedule.
Well, obviously, I believe it's impactful.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully. I'll pause this now. I'll try and set up another meeting. How long do you have, by the way? How much time do you have?
About another quarter of an hour, 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Quarter of an hour. That's fine. I'll set up another one and then I'll send you another link and then we can go again.
Great. See
All
you
right.
soon.
I'll stop the recording. Let's go. Recording is in progress. So part two. Um, I've got a few more questions, and we'll wrap up shortly. But so the way of the world, we spoke about it and we've touched upon it in various aspects, but the way the world is moving, technology, politics, climate change, economic anxiety, search for meaning, but the world is always a difficult place. But right now, is it conducive to enabling a good life? Or has the current scene or has the world scene been better at enabling a good life in the past, or is it the best it's ever been now?
That's a really interesting question, and there's a lot of aspects to it. Um, I think we're living in the best times. The amount of luxury which we have. We are certainly in the most comfortable times humans have ever lived. I don't think one can question that in terms of material comfort. And so on that front, this is the best life, and I believe it's only going to get better. On the other hand, as I mentioned in the past, the incessant focus on materialism can sometimes disturb and detract from other pursuits. And in that sense, as I've said, I do feel there is so much of an increase of anxiety, of depression, of general emotional well-being is just so difficult for so many people today.
Mm.
Now, why is it the case that there's been such an increase? And these kinds of issues, our great-grandparents never had. So one theory I've read is that people didn't have the time to think about these things. They were too occupied being able to live physically and didn't have a chance to think about their mental health. But we're so comfortable today physically, so we now have the ability to think about, okay, so I'm feeling fine physically, and I go to the gym and everything's perfect. But actually, let's not start thinking about my mental health. That's possible. That may be the case. But I do believe we are witnessing, and I don't mince my words here, I do believe we are witnessing the decline of a great civilization.
Mm.
We are really forgetting the basics. We are forgetting the fundamentals. And I think when we risk doing that, then in a sense we are in a time where actually it's concerning. So I think what we need here is we've spent since the Industrial Revolution, we've spent so much time focusing on evolving and promoting our material well-being, and we've been extremely successful at it. And long may it continue that we have even better and more comfortable lives. But never forget, comfortable is not happiness.
Mm. Mm.
Just because one has luxuries, that doesn't give them meaning. That doesn't give them a purpose. And I think there needs to be a shift, a paradigm shift, really, in the way what values we are instilling to the next generation. What is it that's important? Is it just having a career and being the most successful in your career and making the most money? Because I do tend to feel that is the focus nowadays and on much of the Western world, that it's about, getting the best grades in your high school, going to the best university, getting the best job, making the most money, and having the most luxurious life. That is, well, that's amazing. It is, but that's insufficient.
Do you know what? It's so interesting that I want to ask you about fundamentals, but I'll just make a point. Yeah, it's interesting. I've thought about this a lot recently. So I feel like the chain goes like this for me. Uh, let's go to make sure mum and dad, we live in a nice area because Johnny or Timmy need to go to a nice primary school. For what? So they can go get good grades, be with nice children, go to a nice secondary school. For what? Well, they need to go to a nice secondary school so that they can get good grades and then go to a good university. For what? They can go to a good university so they can get a good job. For what? Or they can get a good job so they can get money and then live in a nice area for a nice family. Yeah, but what is that just because you've been told this or because you actually genuinely want that for yourself? And what are you going to do with all this money and career stuff? Like, is it just for making money or are you trying to help people? You're trying to empower people? What is the why, as you said, behind what all these choices about schools and careers rather than just money?
So precisely, I have a friend who is hell bent on becoming extremely wealthy. And he's making his way towards it. But he has a vision that he wants to be a philanthropist.
Mm.
He's been reading about all different kinds. He's Jewish, happens to be Jewish, and he's wants to be a Jewish philanthropist, and he's reading about all different kinds of Jewish philanthropists, and that's his mission. And I support him totally with that, because once you've reached the end point where you've made all that money, if most people don't do it, but even if you are that successful, you do make it, but it hasn't ended. There's now the part 2 to it.
Yeah.
The problem is when there isn't that, then it's just a cycle. And so what? So okay, we've done that. What's next? There's nothing next.
Yeah, I had trouble in my life. I wanted to do well at school for me because it was a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. But I worked very, very hard in my A levels in particular because I wanted to go to a good university, and I did. And then once I got into that university, I was like, I had trouble because I lost my why. I was like, I'm at this place, but why am I here? And
Because
I
you
think
need to get an amazing job. That's why.
no, but I didn't know what that job was, and I was like, what do I want to do now? And my why was like, well, why do I need to get a first, or why do I need to get a 2-1? Like, I don't even know what I want to do. And then I didn't work as hard at university as I did at school. So it's just, yeah, the losing of the why, or not sure what the next why is. It's a big problem that people have.
It is indeed, and that's the root of so much of the issues. Yeah.
Anyway, so do we owe it to society and our community to have a good life? And if so, or maybe not, but if we do, or if we don't, why?
I don't think anyone's got a right to have a good life at all. I don't believe in.
No, I'm saying, do we owe it to our community to lead a good life?
Good. What do you mean by good life? As in a happy life, or good life as in being a good person?
A happy and fulfilled life.
You don't owe it to anyone else. You owe it to yourself.
Mm.
Why? It's it needs to be. You owe it to yourself.
Mm.
You don't owe anyone. Whether you should be happy or not. It's up to you how you're going to conduct yourself and live your own life.
Mm. Do you think, although a lot of people are not fulfilled and not happy and struggle with meaning, do you think that has a negative impact on the world?
Of course it does. Most
So,
definitely it does.
yeah. So arguably the world may be a better place if there were more.
Oh, I see your point. I understand your question now. Yes, most certainly. Because, I remember once asking one of my mentors, how do you do so much? How do you have the time to do everything what you do?
Yeah.
And he answered me, he said to me, remember, never forget, there are 24 hours in the day. And that answer has always stuck with me. There are 24 hours in the day.
Mm.
And when you have, coming back to that key word, when you have that meaning, then that increases productivity. And you are able to use your time far more efficiently and thus be more productive for society. So, in that sense, of course, we owe it to society to live the good life or to be happy and content, because like that, we are increasing the world to become a better place, really.
Mm. Mm. That's good. I agree with that. So I think more or less that's the end of my questions, and we'll draw the conversation to a close. It's been really nice and really, really interesting. But do you have any statements or comments or questions you have for me before we finish?
What's your meaning in life, Sammy?
My meaning?
Have you found one yet?
Um, I found a sense of meaning, but it's quite broad as well. So right now I'm a full-time table tennis coach, and I find that just amazing. And
What do you find amazing? What?
Well, I love table tennis, but it's more the company that I work for. We have a philosophy and an ethic behind a lot of what we do. And the idea is to empower people and inspire people and educate people. We don't just teach people table tennis, but we do our very, very best to improve people's character, to improve people's mindset, to care for people, to uplift people. And we are so holistic in who we look for. Like I coach kids that are 4 years old, that are teenagers, that are primary school. I coach people who are retired. We cater for so many different types of people, and the impact that we have is just so uplifting for the community, and that alongside the table tennis, because I've loved table tennis ever since I was 11 years old.
I know
To
that. I
do
know.
that,
In fact, Sammy,
yeah,
you won our synagogue
yeah,
into
yeah,
synagogue competition. You won it for our synagogue, so I
we did,
know that very well.
yeah. But to inspire and uplift through a vehicle of something that I love, it's an amazing feeling. It's amazing.
That's wonderful to hear. That's
Yeah.
wonderful to hear. But then again, there is that aspect there of improving other people's lives, which is
Yes.
giving you
Yes.
um, that satisfaction.
Yeah, it's amazing. But equally, I also enjoy these types of conversations. I find them very meaningful as they plant seeds for the future, and I think that's very, very powerful. And I enjoy doing this as well. So will do my best to hopefully inspire lots of people, and yourself, and you're inspiring me. So we can hopefully make our community, whether it be the synagogue and the table tennis center, but also anyone who's watching this community, to be uplifted with just conversations that come from different perspectives and people, but there's a sense of harmony and understanding between each of them.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sammy, for the opportunity, and
Thank you.
wishing you
And
much
thank
success in
you
this
very
podcast.
much for taking the time. I'll
My
stop
pleasure.
recording now.